If you've seen a lot of shonen like I have, you start to notice trends that make up a main character. They're usually not the smartest, they have lofty ambitions, they love to fight, and they're generally the most powerful character in the show. Today, I want to talk about Edward Elric and how he diverges from the formula that so many other protagonists fall into, so let's get right into it. I started my list of generic qualities with the protagonists usually not being the smartest. This doesn't mean the character is dumb, just compared to everyone else in the cast, the character is the muscle. This tends to be inescapable in almost all shonen series, but it's occasionally diverted by having the character be one of the smartest when it comes to strategy and battle, almost exclusively. Edward Elric, however, is a prodigy in alchemy, which is a science in the world of Fullmetal Alchemist. Almost all combat ability that Ed has stems from his knowledge. He is one of the smartest characters in both adaptations of the series, and large portions of episodes can be taken up by him researching alchemy. When you compare this to another shonen like Naruto, you can see a stark difference. The character Naruto is notorious for failing his studies, especially in the beginning where both in academics and field tests, Naruto is at the bottom of his class. This may not seem like a huge difference for characters, but as a starting point, it already puts Edward in a much smaller subgenre of protagonist. The next thing I listed was protagonists having lofty ambitions, which may seem like a bit of a stretch to not apply to Edward for people who've seen the series, but I don't think it's unfair to say. Edward's goal is to replace both his arm and his leg that he lost, and give his brother a new body, which is seen impossible through alchemy. That is, unless you have a Philosopher's Stone. His goal then becomes to obtain this mystical object. So to put it simply, Edward wants to create organic material through seemingly impossible means by obtaining an object. Compare that to Dragon Ball, where they're also trying to find a mythical object. 7 of them. The Dragon Balls. The Dragon Balls, as far as scale goes, could bring back thousands of lives, and now in Dragon Ball Super can breathe into existence entire planets and civilizations where there wasn't before. Edward, on the other hand, isn't even trying to create life. Well, not anymore, just creating bodies and body parts that he can transfer a soul to. While in the world of Fullmetal Alchemist this is a large undertaking, it's minuscule in scale compared to other series. How this reflects on him as a protagonist is just how much more personal his goal is. Most main characters want to be the best, and that's the end goal. Having a uniquely personal goal changes not only the scale of the series, but also the kind of character he is. He wants something obtainable, and that makes him more realistic and relatable. Following ambitions, I talked about a character's thrill to fight, which seems to be a must for most shonen. Having the main character strive for combat makes an easy source of conflict and allows long fights to remain fun because you know the character is having fun. Edward Elric, however, avoids fighting. For instance, look at the fight against Barry the Chopper in the original Fullmetal Alchemist series, which was in many ways Edward's first fight. Throughout the fight, despite Edward trying his best to save Winry and fight Barry, he's constantly terrified, panicking for his life. Right after the conclusion of the fight, we find Edward crying as he talks to his brother Al. He's saying how much he was scared and thought he was going to die. This kind of thought process is extremely uncommon among other examples I could bring up, including my favorite anime character, Gon in Hunter x Hunter. After Gon's first fight against his own homicidal maniac, Hisoka, he mentions to his friend that he was scared and thought he would die in the fight. Just like Edward was, but unlike Edward, Gon talks about how exciting that felt, not crying about it, but he had a lot of glee after the confrontation. That's what makes Edward so unique even compared to other critically beloved shonen heroes. Even when put in the same situation, where others feel excitement, Edward feels caution and flinches in the face of danger. While that may make him less of a badass power fantasy character, it makes him that much more relatable. He isn't willing to risk his life over nothing. He has a survival instinct and a fear of death that seems to be non-existent for most other main characters in his genre. Finally, I mentioned that most main characters are the strongest in their cast. Usually this happens along the end of a series, but you can see it coming within the first few arcs of the series often enough. There isn't such a thing as power levels in Fullmetal Alchemist, so it's hard to judge the strength of a person, especially when people's strength take on many different forms. from offensive and defensive capabilities to creating new life forms using just alchemy. It's safe to say that outside of alchemy, Edward isn't the physically strongest, and with alchemy, he's not the most destructive or protective, his feats in creation are not the most impressive, and his abilities are not the most creative. If he lacks all that, I think it's hard to define him as the strongest. What Edward tends to be is one of the most balanced alchemists in the series, a jack of all trades but master of none. Compare this to Goku from Dragon Ball. Goku at the end of every arc in Dragon Ball Z, except one, has been the strongest and fastest character that the audience knows of. This has gotten better in Dragon Ball Super, but it's still no question that Goku will end the series as the strongest thing in existence. So comparing Edward to the basis of most shonen tropes, it's night and day. Edward doesn't belong in the same category of character that we could expect from this genre. In closing, I want to say that it's not that any of the characters I mentioned are worse characters. In fact, one of them is my favorite character. But I've seen some sentiment recently that Edward is a generic character, and I just need to voice that that's just not true. He may not be as cool as Roy Mustang, or funny like Armstrong, as sentimental as Hughes, or mysterious as Scar, and he for sure isn't like any other shonen main characters. What he is an interesting character who manages to be relatable without being a blank slate. He's a character who fits into the world without being the most important piece of the world. He's a guy who excels at what he excels at, but to a realistic degree. Edward Elric is just not a typical shonen protagonist. And that'll do it for this video. Thanks everyone for listening to me rant about animated characters for a couple minutes. Hopefully it was as fun to listen to as it was to write. I want to give a quick shout out to the channel Tales of Nerdia. He makes some great analysis content and I told him I'd give him a shout out in my next video, but it's taken me a year to make another video, so hopefully better late than never. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video.